Hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the third installment of Mad Sounds, hosted by me, Lars Smallwood, and my boy.
Trenton Golden.
How you doing today, brother?
I'm old and decrepit. How about you, boss man?
I'm young and pure. I don't know what's the opposite of decrepit.
I think it's the Hamilton quote, young and hungry or something. I don't know.
Hey yo, just like my country, I'm young, scrappy, and hungry.
That's scrappy. That's a good word for it.
Scrappy, young and scrappy. There you have it. Well, anyway, welcome back to another episode of our music podcast, Mad Sounds. Hopefully you've been enjoying the show thus far. We've been having a lot of fun talking here and releasing them. But today is not going to be a fun day. Well, it'll be fun, but the conversation may or may not into some questionable territories. This conversation is more or less going to be centered around a lot of ethical concerns. It could get slightly political in some ways. And if that's not what some people are wanting to hear, I understand clicking off. It's more the industry that surrounds music rather than music itself, which, you know, some people may not be wanting to hear about. And we're not trying to put you onto that if you don't want it. So click away if you don't want to hear any kind of topical conversations. But hey, maybe it'll be an interesting conversation for the both of us. And Trenton had a disclaimer that he wanted to share too.
With that, trigger warning for this episode, just some topics. So involving, you know, the good old fun stuff that nobody likes to talk about.
Yeah.
If you're not into super heavy discussions about psychological problems, disorders, stuff like that, now would be a good time to dip out.
yeah, for sure. We'll give you 1 second. Seconds over. All right. So, and I mean, we're no experts on any of these by any means. We're just two guys that kind of not have controversial opinions, but it's a situation, or I don't even know what you really want to call it. Basically, what we're talking about today is whether or not it's possible to separate an art from an artist. Basically, in the last, give or take 10 years, we've seen a humongous rise in celebrities basically being held accountable for their actions, acts from the past being brought to light, secrets being I sound like a tabloid, the secret unleashed. But the whole point is basically in this day and age with social media, it's gotten a lot harder for a lot of famous people, and that includes musicians, as well as actors and public figures, to remain hidden in what they truly think and what they truly feel. And their digital footprint is everywhere nowadays, and that can rub a lot of people off. And I think both of you and I can agree that it's a good idea to make these people accountable for what they do in real life, regardless of what they do musically.
Oh yeah, 100%. And now, like you said, in this day and age with your digital footprint, like everybody's a lot more under a microscope. So you're everything about you is a lot more online and everywhere. And when people have like things come out about them, it's definitely good to hold people accountable for things and don't sweep it under the rug, because that's just like a thing to do. And if you see something happening, tell somebody.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even just with the upper echelon, the elite famous people. This is just in the modern day, I think our culture has made a lot of strides in protecting each other and helping each other. There's still a lot of issues in play. There's still a lot of people that do not get their comeuppance until too late, after damage has been done numerous times over, and they're late to the game and getting damage done unto them, if you will. So basically, where we're going with this is that, is it possible when you are a public figure or an entertainer in some way, an actor, a painter, and in our case, a musician, is it even possible for you to take what they create, their art, and remove that from the person themselves? Because a lot of artists tend to put themselves into their art. They see the world through a certain lens. They see it in a certain type of way, and therefore that's reflected in what they create. And it gets hard to differentiate between the person that they truly are and what they create when the lines are so blurred sometimes. And for so many people, they don't even know how they can or should go about supporting an artist if they don't like the actions that they've taken in real life.
Yeah. I find that listening to bands growing up and then later finding out that, oh, well, this came out about them, I find it very difficult sometimes to still listen to them. You know what I mean? Like, you really, like, love the music, but you're like, oh, God, I really don't like
It's
what they
yeah,
did.
there's
Or,
a
like,
huge
they come out
asterisk.
a certain belief or they make, like, a statement, and you're like, oh, gosh, I really don't like that. I don't agree with that. And then you have this, like, weird inner turmoil a little bit. You're like, well, do I really like their music, or does that ruin the music? You know, like, it's kind of a
Yeah,
weird
like you
moment.
sometimes you can manipulate yourself into being like, well, I don't know if I like this, or maybe I just don't like the person, and then therefore it's hard for me to enjoy the music because of that person. Like it becomes it's a rain cloud over their music, especially if you love it so much.
Oh yeah, and then people who are like really big fans who are like, well, I support them no matter what they do, and it's like, ooh, ooh, what you mean
That
by that?
So there's a lot of questions and conversations that can arise from this debate, and that's why we wanted to have it, is because especially in this 21st century where this, again, I guess you could call it a movement, has become so prevalent. It seems like every other day there's someone apologizing for something. We have like a scale now of like, how good is this on the apology radar?
I see the YouTube apology tier list videos everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So nowadays it's going to be like metal singer tier list on how bad did they mess up or whatever.
Reggie number one.
Ronald Reagan. I mean, honestly, dude, he is. Oh, we'll get into it, but I'm trying to not speed run through this because I think it's a very interesting conversation to have, especially for a music podcast. And the music will factor into it because, again, there's art and artist, and whether or not someone can actually separate those two things is a question that is unanswered for a lot of people, but it's also very subjective in a lot of senses.
Definitely.
It's very difficult sometimes depending on, I think it's the hardest when a particular individual is the front person of the band or like a huge creative force in a band, like a vocalist.
Yeah, I feel like when it's a solo artist, it's a lot easier to be like, oh, well, I just like won't be a fan, or I won't listen to it. But sometimes when it's like with bands, and bands especially, being a musician, you're focused on like the group as a whole sometimes, more than just one member.
Mhm.
There's a few bands where there's been incidents where like a bass player or a guitarist or a drummer will come out and have like something wrong, or they've done something, and you're like, oh gosh, well, what if I just listened to like the music that they wrote after that member left? And
Yeah.
that's that I find a little strange. People will kind of like nitpick their way around it and almost seem like they won't acknowledge it. They almost like kind of like brush it away sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, people do put parameters on it a lot just to be like, okay, if it's this, this, and this, then I can listen to it, which I think is fine because
Mm-hmm.
it's what personally makes them happiest when they're enjoying music. Because, like, I mean, we all want to consume good music.
I don't
It's,
know. I torture myself sometimes. Put on
I
Olivia
want to
to
listen.
destroy my ears.
I want to listen to Imagine Dragons today. Yeah. And then that's another thing too, is that to a lesser extent, there's also, what if these are like genuinely nice people, but I just don't like their music? That's like the
Yeah.
lowest level tier of separating an art and an artist, is that like, well, I mean, they're not monsters, they're not hideous people. They do good at what they do for the people that like them. It's just I don't enjoy them, so they're passable in that regard.
Oh yeah. I mean, that also like that whole idea also falls into my all-time favorite thing, is finding reasons to hate artists.
Oh my gosh, that is a trend recently, especially on I think like TikTok and Instagram. People will actively look for any controversy in someone's career and try to bring that up as a point of why you should not listen to this band. And I feel like that's dangerous because we're gonna end up in a world where you can't listen to anything.
Yeah, literally. You're gonna turn on dubstep music that was made by AI, and that's all you got. That's all you got.
Is basically Skrillex.
Oh yeah. Wait, well, I mean, that haircut's pretty rough, but like that's the only crime he's ever committed that I know of.
The
I know of.
The new haircut?
Just any haircut, honestly. They're all pretty. I mean,
Skrillex was never eye candy. Is that what you're saying?
well, he looks like he works at a Marshall's.
He went from a Spencer's to a Marshall's.
Oh yeah. Now his haircut gives me very like I work at the Gap. But
He won by the flannel.
Yeah.
Right. But I personally also don't like that trend because people also can blow things wildly out of proportion. And I think another problem is that because we've instigated this level of accountability for artists to be better people and to have higher standards of, I don't know, empathy, ethics, logic, it places a lot of unfair mistakes onto them as well. Like, in a lot of ways, there can be a lot of lost context to a lot of these attempted cancellations or these controversies, like words are misconstrued because of the media, or they didn't know about something and therefore people use that as justifiable reasons to not listen to their music. I think one particular example is I saw one time, it was like, your favorite artists like suck, episode 50 or whatever, and it was like, oh, in the 90s, Metallica, James Hetfield had a guitar with it wasn't the Nazi symbol, but it was like a logo that represented dictatorship and like a regime of some kind. It was like the little cross emblem thing.
Oh, like an iron cross?
I guess it was an iron cross, if that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking of. And pardon me for not knowing that off the bat immediately and what it may signify. But simultaneously, is that something that, like, he doesn't play that anymore, at least to my knowledge, something that is justifiable to not listen to Metallica's music?
I don't know. I just choose not to listen to Metallica for any given reason. But
Right, but that specific reason.
I mean, in my opinion, I feel like it kind of comes down to the listener, because like if that like strikes a chord with you like really heavy and you're like, I just can't get past this, like you're totally justified for that reason. And but like if you're having like a turmoil with it and then you try to dictate someone else's like judgment of the band by being like, oh well, you're kind of like a piece of shit for listening to him and all this, like because when some people really love a band, they will die on the mountain for that band. And when like a controversy comes out, it's almost like people gang up on fans of that band, even if they had like no knowledge of it. Like, I didn't know that James had that guitar. I'm not a Metallica fan. I don't know. Like, I don't listen to Metallica anyway. So
yeah, you just didn't like him for reasons outside of that particular instance.
Yeah. Like, I had no knowledge of that. So like,
and plus people in the past like could say things and like totally get away with it,
yeah, like the culture really changed how live performance and like album artwork and music was made. Like right now, I know there's been like lots of talk about like strikes when it comes to actors guilds and stuff like that, but there times like writers for musicians who are on strike, but you never really hear about it because the media for the labels are so well at burying it, and they pushing the artist so much that you just never see that. So unlike in film, music, it's a lot easier to get away with things because there's a lot more doors that can be closed like that.
Yeah, there's so many people behind the scenes in the music industry, like I know that a lot of people will jump to the term ghostwriters. People. And I know that obviously you think the artist and you think like, oh, their music. If it's a band of 6 or like a solo artist, a duo, whatever, it's their stuff. But sometimes, if you read the fine print or like see what they say, sometimes there's individuals behind the scenes that are helping make these songs possible. And in some ways, maybe you never know about them. But yeah, I can buy that there are a lot of people that can get shut out of the industry who you don't even know about.
Yeah. And it's crazy because like when we think of like controversies and all this crazy stuff that happens in music, like we think on like a huge level, like top 40 artists like Taylor Swift, Drake, Kendrick, like we think like that level. But it even like small scenes, it happens in small labels, like it
local scenes, like in a city,
Yeah, It's happening in a city near you.
There's disgusting people all around you.
Oh, there's vile people.
And I don't laugh to like downplay it or belittle the seriousness of what may happen. It's more just I think some people can believe that their favorite artists are patron saints. And, not everyone has been a flawless individual. Sure, there's degrees to it, there's tiers of actions that are reprehensible. But I think if, I pushed this guy over one time because he annoyed me, is very different than being a racist,
Very, very different.
Yeah, like assaulting someone versus, I don't know, dropping an F-bomb in an interview, just like, how could you? But I think also we're a little smarter to understand, like, well, that's not a big deal. Like, that's just a minor, because there's a different, I wonder sometimes too, and I'll put this in your, is there a difference between a controversy and a crisis? Because I feel like a controversy is someone said something that people took in a certain way, and then they have to work around it. And then a crisis is a full-on like allegation and this open investigation into someone's claims. Like, is there a difference, or are they all just synonymous terms for people being under a microscope?
That's a good question. To answer your question with an example.
Okay.
When you were talking about taking things out of context, what keeps popping into my mind is the incident with the Beatles when they came to America. Do you remember what happened?
Yeah, probably one of the earliest examples of an artist getting severe backlash from the public.
For those of you that don't know, when the Beatles came over to America for a tour, they were getting interviewed in the South. I believe it was in Alabama, the heart of the South, and
that is the belt.
Yeah, the Bible Belt.
That's
Lennon,
the buckle of the belt, dude.
That's the buckle. That is the huge. I placed fourth in the radio competition belt buckle. But anyway, John Lennon in an interview said that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus.
It's funny to think about.
It is, because everybody knows John Lennon was quite a character and had some very interesting views and said a lot of crazy things.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it was taken out of context, because what he was actually talking about is the Beatles are more well known than Jesus in modern day standards, because everybody had a Beatles album in their home. Not everybody had a Bible at the time.
Yeah, I can understand what he meant. I do think it was a bit of an outlandish comment.
Crazy to say it, though. Absolutely crazy.
I mean, he was bonkers to say it, that a religious figure is lesser than a pop band from the UK.
We look back on it, we laugh, but at the time, like, it started like an outrage in the South. They were burning Beatles albums like book burnings, like a stack of vinyl just on fire at churches. I mean,
they were stomping them. They were rioting. There was, I believe, part of that was what stopped them from touring for a minute.
Yeah. And what's really crazy about that is, just like a year later, he apologized for it. And then like 2 years after that, they were even bigger than they were before.
Yeah, I mean, it somehow feels like the times were a lot faster back then, but also slower, if that makes sense. Because there's some individuals today that have made wild claims, and people will still be on their train for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder where it comes from a lot, because you mentioned him earlier, and I'll bring him up now. For those who are unaware of who Ronnie Radke is, he is the singer of a rock band, Falling in Reverse, who has become quite a controversial figure. He was in prison at one point for multiple things. I think DUI. I believe there was domestic disturbance at a certain point, maybe some drug possession as well. But ever since, he has just gotten louder and louder against anyone who basically dislikes him and his music. He says he welcomes criticism, but he has the thinnest skin in the game as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I think his music just isn't very good.
Oh my God. All right. Unpopular opinion. Escape the Fate is way better than Falling in Reverse.
Honestly, if you save that for the hot take, I would have agreed with you on that.
Pre-mortal, not ejaculation, but pre-mortal hot take.
Pre-ejaculation hot take.
Band name, Premortal Ejaculation. That's I want to say they're from Pennsylvania.
Not New England.
No. Just Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania's whack.
Well, point being is that he has just, that band, which is basically his baby at this point. You know, I think all the musicians are just studio musicians and he's the lead singer. They have gotten so popular and gotten so big, number one, because they have done the multi-genre crossover. They've trended all over social media. So they're playing the game right. The hugest issue is that their frontman is a humongous jackass. He's so arrogant.
A light way of putting that.
a very light way of putting it. You know, I don't even think I didn't even touch on how he made semi out of touch, bordering on transphobic comments before, and also bordering on misogyny. You know.
Yeah.
And there's a point where it's not just, oh, that was in the past and now he's grown. He's different now. You know, he's learned from it and he's a better person. No, he's still doing this. He's still being an asshole, really.
Yeah, that's one thing that really, like, I had a conversation with a work colleague of mine. She is part of the LGBTQ plus, and she's like, one of my all-time favorite bands is Falling in Reverse, and you bringing up the transphobic remarks reminded me of this. I was like, why do you like them? And she said that it's kind of like funny how like horrible he is. And that's a very interesting subject, because that kind of falls under the Kanye West.
We knew he was coming. We knew he was coming.
He was coming.
But I'm coming.
Human and I'm coming. But I grew up listening to Kanye West. I went and saw Kanye West play with the Sunday service back when Jesus is King came out. But when he started making all these anti-Semitic comments and everything, I was like, oh my God, like that's wild. I was like, that's a horrible thing. That's awful. And then, like, within 5 minutes, people are making memes about it. And then people are like, it's just Kanye. It's like, what? Like,
yeah, so obviously, I feel like everyone's initiated at this point. But for those who aren't, you know, Kanye West, one of the most influential modern hip hop / rap artists. He really set a precedent for a lot of new talent to come through and be self-produced, but also be singer-songwriters and rappers. I personally never cared for his music, but that's besides the point. But, you know, people cite a lot of his psychological issues, such as, I believe, bipolar and depression, as sources of his crudeness in the public eye. You know, for various comments he's said, for the various things he's done. And he's always been a controversial figure in that way. He's kind of sloppy when you look at him from an outside 100%. Lens. And now with the anti-Semitic remarks, it just boiled over entirely. And like, there's a hard line in the sand between the people that this is like the ultimate, can we still support this artist or can we not? And I don't think people still know what to do necessarily, because I'm personally of the mind that I don't want to hear someone who made such terrible comments about a large minority of people say in a song, I'm not anti-Semitic, I keep a few Jews on the staff. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like you hear that and you're like, is this like, there's no way that this is just like his mental state. Like he clearly knows what he's doing and what he's saying. And
it's like, does that mean that he said these things to get publicity for then people to listen to his music? Because in that sense, that is pathetic and desperate, if you ask me.
Oh yeah.
And he's either unaware of it, which is sad, or he is, and that's despicable.
Yeah, and I mean, controversy sells. I mean, it is one of the oldest tricks in the book, and his clothing brand sold beautifully. After Adidas dropped his clothing brand Yeezy, there was like 5 months they were not making any clothing or anything, and then they announced he was coming back, and it sold better than it ever had sold before. So people were concerned that Adidas and Kanye were like working together to basically build hype out of controversy for his new clothing brand, which is just absolutely disgusting if that's like the case and that's the truth.
Right. Which begs the question, like, so who are these people? Who's still supporting him at this point? Are they actual Kanye fans that believe that, you know what, he said some mean things, but he's still good in my book? Or is it a bunch of nihilistic teenagers that think it's really funny, to like make memes about anti-Semitism? And because it can also become dangerous to say that kind of rhetoric, and then that can impose onto an impressionable mind in some way.
Oh yeah, and I mean, you can probably agree with this. When we were like 14 and we were on the internet and we had friends, they would say some horrific things, wouldn't they?
Oh, dude, like any Call of Duty lobby ever was full of slurs and nowadays not PC commentary.
Yeah. And like back then that was like normal. Like that was a normal thing. I didn't participate in it, and I know you didn't, but for hearing it, we became kind of desensitized to it because we heard it so much. But like you hear all these things, and now that we're like older, we're in our like mid-20s now. Well, I am. Dear God, I can't believe I just said that.
I'm getting there.
But now that I'm old and crabby,
I have a boomer mindset.
literally, like I'm becoming my parents. But you hear these things and you're like, man, that just makes me like sad or kind of frustrates me a little bit. And I'm like, is it that when I was younger listening to this music, I was like, oh yeah, that's not that bad. But then when I get older, I like see the effects that it has on people long term. And in the moment, you're not really thinking about the future, but what you listen to kind of like slowly comes out in what you think.
What you listen to musically is reflective of who you are as a person.
Yeah, to an extent. Because if the artist you're listening to is like saying all these things, you're gonna, without realizing it, start thinking that's normal, thinking that's okay. Because especially if you're like a super fan, because it's kind of like we talked about music that in the first episode about like wearing band merch, and when you listen to metal, you start dressing like you listen to metal. If you're listening to like has like kind of certain viewpoints, you're gonna start kind of affiliating yourself with that. And you're going to be like, yeah, well, I kind of agree with some of this. Well, if the artist I love agrees with it, then why can't I agree with it? And then you slowly start kind of becoming more and more like this person.
Yeah, especially if you're younger, then you start to believe that, like, oh, you know what? Maybe they've got a point.
Yeah,
and I don't think...
Crazy.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone, at least to me, should and could look at Kanye right now and say, you know what? He's misunderstood. I get it.
Yeah, like maybe a 12-year-old or 14-year-old be like, maybe that's just his mindset. And it's like, bro, like don't have that mindset.
No, I think that exudes ignorance, and the term ignorance is bliss comes to mind, because it's a lot better if you don't look at things. It's a lot easier to turn a blind eye to something instead of facing it head on. Because, I think we both had artists that we love or appreciate in some way, and then before we know it, this allegation that comes to light, this controversy, you're left in a place sitting there like, oh damn, like I guess I have to really tackle head on how I choose to still support this. And again, it's subjective to how, like, what is the severity and where can you not keep it anymore. So I guess I pose this question to you, like, where is the line between when an artist who has done legitimate harm and been irresponsible in real life versus the music that they make? Where is that division for you? How do you see a separation between what is made and who made it?
I will answer this with the best knowledge that I have of this situation. Brother, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I literally have to take it case by case every single time.
Someone gets arrested for a DUI, it's like, well, that was dumb. And then someone gets arrested for CP, and then it's like, oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's kind of like with the so this is kind of bumping back to a conversation we had a second ago, and I want to know your view on this, because this kind of steps into this conversation. There is a very famous Norwegian black metal band by the name of Mayhem that started in the 90s.
Go ahead and give people the cliff notes on Mayhem.
Mayhem was started by a man by the name of Euronymous. That was his black metal character nickname. But along with bass player Necro Butcher, drummer Hellhammer, and Euronymous on guitar, they
not their birth name.
Not their birth names. He was not born Hellhammer. but
can you imagine?
Oh, dude, yeah, baby Hellhammer. That'd be
this is
so
my sweet little Hellhammer.
But they issued a singer by the name of Dead, is his stage name. His birth name was Pela, I believe. And content warning, unalive stuff coming up if you don't want to hear it. Now's definitely a time to cut off.
They made it this far, but hey, once again, like, it's about to get heavy here.
Dead was suffering from very, very bad depression and later took his own life, and the guitarist Euronymous came by his house and found him, and as most people would call the cops, Euronymous didn't. He drove to the nearest dollar store, bought a camera, drove back, and took photos, moved the body around, and decided to use those photos as a bootleg album cover for their live album, Dawn of the Black Hearts. Saying that sounds like a movie scene. This all really happened. And this is a very big like thing in metal music. It is very big in the history of metal that this happened. It's very notorious. And with all that being said, I am a huge fan of Mayhem as a band. I love their last few albums. Do I agree with what Euronymous did? Absolutely not. I think it is like a horrific thing.
Mm-hmm.
But Euronymous is no longer alive. It's basically a complete new band. They do not agree with anything that happened back then. Is it still okay to listen to the band?
That's curious, because if it's true that all the members that are currently in the band has nothing to do with that situation, which is, from what you're telling me, true, you almost wonder why they didn't just name a band differently, like get a different name, you know? But Mayhem, the name was already popular before that situation, so I guess they're writing off of that fame, that notoriety, that status as a black metal band with so much clout, so much acclaim, so much love and adoration for them, at least their music. You almost wonder, why didn't they name it something else? Because Mayhem sells. And why does Mayhem sell? Because it's shocking. Mayhem was a shocking band for its time.
Yeah, and the bass player who played at the time left the band, and then the drummer decided to dip out for a while. And then after all that blew over, they came back to the band years later.
And was it cool enough to still support them, basically, was the real question.
And it's really weird because I love the music. I absolutely adore black metal. I think they are one of the best black metal bands ever. But whenever I listen to them and I hear like the original stuff from that era, I'm just like, man, this makes me like uncomfortable. Like I don't.
For those also unaware, like black metal is a very scary form of metal music. You know, it's very harsh vocals, very screeching guitars. You know, technically, like on a proficiency scale, as far as talent goes, you can't deny that the guys can play, but it's very aggressive and very scary music in a lot of ways, for those who don't know what the genre is. Yeah. But it goes beyond in some way, because for the longest time, you know, metal music, rock music has always been associated with Satanism, the occult, which is, it's going to ruin the young. It'll corrupt their minds, make them do evil things.
Hell yeah.
You know, and I've always hated that argument that music is the reason why people have violence in their hearts and minds. Same with video games. People see media and are influenced by it, but that doesn't mean that it's the media's fault necessarily, because I could turn on American Psycho right now and not have a single thought of actually doing any of the things Patrick Bateman thinks about in that entire movie. But, you know, that movie was cited as a scapegoat for someone to commit heinous acts because they had a psychological malfunction that believed that I want to do the things I see in this movie. And so it's the same with music where I don't believe anyone. I mean, that's a lie because, as I say, oh yeah, music has never directly harmed anyone. When you talk about black metal, there is a very clear. I think there should be a distinction between music and what happens in the real world, but black metal was like, and still is in some ways, just there was no line blurred. The music was very occult centric. The musicians in these scenes and the fans even would do very occult like things. There's also, who is it, the guitarist or vocalist of Burzum?
Yeah, so Varg Vickers, I believe. Yeah, Varg Vickers, who ended up joining Mayhem on their first full-length studio album. He started a side project called Burzum, and it is a very notorious project, but it is a very disturbing project because Varg later killed the guitarist from Mayhem, Euronymous, in his apartment.
And also
Stabbing.
set fire to numerous churches.
Yeah, he would burn churches to promote his album.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the thing about metal is like that early scare of black metal in Norway was like people were so scared of that scene coming to the US because Metal magazine in the 90s, I can't remember their name, they did a big write-up about Mayhem creeping in from Norway, coming to get you at night, and it almost like became the boogeyman over there. Like they were just like scary, but there was no line between the music and the people. It was like you would
Because
go
what
to
they
these
promoted in their music was what they would do in real life.
yeah, like they were singing about like murdering people, and one of the friends of the band murdered a homosexual person in a park just for giggles. Like that's when the actions and the music become just absolutely insane. You're just like, there's no way this is real, but it's real and it happened.
So does that mean that because people will say like, oh, that's just black metal.
Yeah, that became a thing in the 90s is people were like, oh, you're not true cult unless you do this. And it's like, what?
Yeah, this idea that the music has to in some way elicit this feeling in you of doing what it again. That's what people thought was going to happen in the 80s. Like
Yeah.
people thought
And
Metallica was going to corrupt minds. People thought Twisted Sister was destroying the youth. No, it's fucking black metal from Europe.
yeah, like Dean Schneider in drag. Oh my god.
I can't
Oh
do it,
god.
man. Can't do it.
Dude,
But you know what?
while
Black metal will be black.
it's like Dean Schneider in drag while Norway's losing 30 churches and like 20 people a year.
That's what I mean. So, and I feel like it honestly comes down to that boys will be boys mentality of like, well, that's just black metal. Get over it, accept it for what it is. And in some ways, I can't sit here and be like supportive of that musical genre because even if it is good music and they are talented, I can't say to myself, you know what? I can just overlook the fact that the musicians involved have done real world harm to so many people and
Yeah.
done literally some of the most heinous acts ever. And I'm supposed to sit here and be like, you know what, but the production goes hard. I don't know if I can
Yeah.
I don't know if I can personally do that. It makes me a little uncomfortable to think about like, yeah, you hear this good vocalist on this song? Yeah, well, he's the guy that's on the front album cover because he really killed himself. Like, wow.
Yeah.
It gets too real and too heavy for me. It's like obscure horror films that are like, it becomes like a snuff film. you know
Yeah, it really does.
if I'm using the analogy of like horror films and metal bands, most metal bands fall into this like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Blumhouse horror films,
Yeah.
Chucky, all that stuff. They're entertainment and they're fun, but they also have serious themes in there. It's not just all goofy and slapsticky. There's actual high art within a lot of metal music. And then you have black metal bands that are more like, I don't know, Cannibal Holocaust and a Serbian film where it's like, I am shutting this off. I cannot deal with this because it just feels too Again, it's too real. And dark web internet stuff. And like, I don't want to see that. Therefore, I don't want to hear it either.
Yeah, and when you mention like the dark web stuff, there's a genre of metal called gore grind, and it is just unaudible vocals, insanely fast program on the computer drums, guitar riffs that aren't even really legible of any sound, just noise. But the imagery in it is just like real world death photos and stuff from like what's that website that everybody used to go on back in the day?
Live leak or something.
Yeah, Lively. It was like they would take Lively like photos and videos and like just put their band logo above it and like saturate it with like a lot of orange and reds. And it was like just to be shocking. Like you make all this music, if that's what you want to call it, even though I know I'm gonna get some flack for that. I don't consider a lot of gore grind music because
Under the large umbrella, it is music. I just think it's not very good music.
yeah, there we go. Not good music.
That's another thing too. Like, I want to like settle this too, is that like we're talking about all music here because so many people will say like at movies. You remember the whole debate with Martin Scorsese with movies, where he's like the Marvel movies aren't cinema. He was putting this arbitrary label on what is and isn't actually movies, but categorically they're all movies. It's just you think they're not good.
I'll reframe that statement. It's just not good.
It's just not good music. Yeah, that's how I put it.
There's like one good gore grind band. They're called like Devourment, and they're actually pretty good. Little shameless plug. Nobody look up their album covers, please.
No. I know we're not going to show them right now. Are you kidding me?
No, God, no. That's the thumbnail. It's just a Devourment cover.
Oh no! Wait, hold on. Real reaction. Lars is looking up album covers of Devourment. Oh. It's not the worst I've seen.
I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more band to look up.
Yeah.
I do like this band. They're a little bit more on the lines of porno grind, gore grind with very sexual lyrics. But they are called Waco Jesus. I want to see your reaction to this covers.
The fuck? Okay. Oh, what is that?
Something about the com. Ew.
It's a bit much, isn't it?
Oh.
So let's put it like this. So, like, let's think about like other bands here, like Cannibal Corpse or Cattle Decapitation. On their face, those are some pretty brutal band names, and their album covers have also been brutal throughout the years.
Oh yeah, song lyrics and everything have just been absolutely like controversial.
Yeah, but in the real world, those guys are actually like super nice.
Oh my gosh, yes, like Corpse Grinder, George Fisher, who is the vocalist for Cannibal Corpse, every tour will go to crane machines and win stuffed animals, and at the end of tours donates those to children in need. Such a good guy.
Yeah, and like I'm sure he's a joy in person, just like a majority of the other members in both of those bands. I think I saw a good breakdown one time. It was the singer of Cattle Decap talking about all their album art, basically breaking down like, yeah, like it's graphic, but it's not supposed to be taken as seriously. It's all for the sake of piquing someone's interest to listen to the album, and it fits the aesthetic. So from a pure band and marketing perspective, they're doing shocking, but it's also not, again, directly harmful to anyone, unlike Norwegian black metal.
Yeah.
I won't sit here and say all black metal bands or any death metal bands are satanic or they actually kill goats and offer them as gifts to the Lord below. But however, when that is so synonymous with what that genre is about, again, I just don't know if I can get down with it, because do we really need all that? Is when it comes to making music. I don't think anyone should die for music.
Yeah, the other side of this conversation that most people don't talk about is people stir up these controversies about metal bands, like mainly from like religious groups. Living in the South, you've probably ran into it. A lot of religions are very anti any kind of rock or metal because of the satanic panic that they lived through or their parents lived through. A lot of people try to put all of this controversy on them, and there's just nothing there. They like falsely accuse them of being like child predators and stuff like this just because of their lyrics, and they're like, oh, they're murderers, they're racist, and it's like it's Creed singing Higher. Like, I don't think that.
But to be fair, like, I don't think anyone was looking at Scott Stapp and being like, that guy, he's a monster.
I mean, I was watching Skillet and I was like, oh yeah, that's a monster.
That guy is so evil, you have no idea.
like with George Fisher of Cannibal Corpse, one of the songs that they do is I Come Blood, and it's talking about having relations with a corpse. And like everybody was like, he's a necrophiliac, he's like digging up bodies on tour, taking them back to the van. It's like, no, he's not. Like, I don't. Where's your evidence? Like, if you have a like dancing with one, then I'll believe you.
Sure, they're being shocking and grotesque for the sake of doing it, and whether or not you like that or buy into it is one thing. But if he actually did it, then it'd be like, okay, man, you've gone too far. Because sometimes maybe that's just what they want to write about, is just being in a perspective, you know, or just being in a weird POV. It's not actually them. And I think a lot of people, that's why it becomes hard to separate art from artists, is because people don't know where the difference is between a singer or a band and the music they create, whether or not what they sing about is true experience, or they've seen it, or they've experienced it, or if it's from a completely different mindset.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind. I see like rock and metal with talking about like death and murder and stuff, kind of like how in rap they sing about like doing drive-bys, or they're talking about like dealing drugs, or they're talking about like hooking up with like hundreds of women. It's more of a character persona, because in today's age everybody thinks that lyrics to songs have to have like a really deep personal meaning sometimes. Like they kind of overanalyze it, and they're like, oh well, if this person says they were running guns and sleeping with hundreds of women, that must be true. Like that must be what their life is like, because they're writing from their perspective, and that's not always true. Like, I mean, from musician standpoint, me and you, in one of our songs, what is it, Morning Sun?
Yeah.
I never see the morning sun. I sleep in till like 10. Like, I haven't seen the morning sun rise.
We haven't experienced that.
I have not experienced that. I'm Eepin, bro. I'm an EP boy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, spoiler alert, musicians can lie. You know?
Oh, you're joking. There ain't no way.
They do it a lot, you know, and
is not blown up and act like you don't know me.
I'm sorry to break your heart. I would prefer musicians that actively talk about what they're currently going through, their experiences, their true stories, their trauma, working it out through art. I prefer that, but I'm also not opposed to bands that write from a story perspective. I mean, like Pink Floyd wrote concept albums. They didn't do that in real life, you know? David Bowie did not go to space.
What?
Huh? How could you say that?
So Creed didn't go higher?
No, he wants to. He's asking someone to make him higher.
Oh, wait. I have a whole new thought about this song now.
So, with all that in mind about, like, you know, black metal, real world applications and real world implications, do you still support the scene, or do you just support individual artists who aren't real life murderers, basically?
Personally, I would support artists who are not the worst. Like, if somebody had like you talked about, pushed somebody down or something, or got violent, like in an altercation, like a fight, not like a domestic abuse situation, but like say a fan punched them and they punched them back, I'm still gonna listen to that band. I would say judge off of how you feel, what connects with you, and if you don't agree with something, don't support them. But if you do really like their music and they have done something that you don't agree with, here's a good tip to get around that. You ready for this?
You got a tip?
You buy it from a thrift store.
Ooh, go to the Kmart.
If you don't want to support a band and you still like their music, you buy that stuff secondhand, so that way you're not supporting the artist and you're still getting your fix.
Man, again, it is a case by case. I think you were right when you said it's a case by case basis. You can't have a rubric and then apply that to every single situation that may or may not arise. I wonder to myself, is there a section of people out there that just don't think it'll even matter? I think in some ways they'll probably see or say that, oh, I have to look up this person and do research about them and see how they actually are in real life and whether or not that means I can listen to their music. Like, that's too much. I'm just here for the music. Because I hear that all the time. When people use the in favor of the art versus the artist and in the separation conversation, they usually will say, well, I'm just here for the music. If the music's good, that's all that matters. So how do you stand on that? If that's all you focus on rather than the people behind it? Because then again, the music can become way more political and almost parasocial in a way if you're judging everyone off of their merits as an individual, not their talents as songwriters.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to put it. I guess are you trying to say that if you just kind of linger in this ignorance of like not knowing the artist and you just kind of listen to the music, like, are you saying that's kind of where somebody could be at?
Yeah. Could someone listen to Kanye right now and be like, well, I don't care about what he said. I just want the music to be good.
Yeah, I think someone totally, I'm sure there's like so many people like that, because whenever I have conversations with people and I'm like, hey, do you know this artist? They're like, no, I have no idea who that is. Then I'll play a song and they're like, oh yeah, I love the song. I almost wish we could go back to where it was just music and you're not so focused on the artist or the band or the project, because it is like interesting, because when you do listen to just the music aspect and you're only there to listen to the music, you don't really care about the artist or the band. It almost becomes this weird, like, dreamlike way, in my opinion, because with me and you being musicians and artists, we want to know everything we can about the band, about the artist, about the merch, about vinyl pressings. But I feel like if you're only listening for the music aspect and you really don't know who the artist is, I don't think there's anything horribly wrong with that. But then you'll get informed of it eventually if you're like playing their music. So you will get informed.
Which I think is also on the matter of the person that informs them to not be, basically, don't make them feel dumb. Don't make them feel like they're a terrible person because they like that band, because they may have not even known about what was going on outside of just the songs.
Yeah, and we do live in a day and age, we sound old, but we live in a day and age where you can't not hear about an artist or a band's personal life.
Yeah.
Like, if you like have Instagram or anything and you're like, oh, I like their song, I'll follow them, you will see so much about them.
Mm-hmm.
And especially now, like, artists kind of want to have a relationship more with the audience and their fans now more than ever, because that's seen as like a good thing. But I don't know. I don't think that's always a good thing. Sometimes I think it's better if they do keep their personal lives out of the social eye,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of artists out there that just have their life pretty much tucked away. You have no real idea, and they like it like that. And in some ways, that's like the best version of that. Like, I think about how, Rage Against the Machine is such an iconic band because of their music, because of their messaging. No one really knows what they're about in their day-to-day personal lives. Is that better or is that worse? Because, well, what's the because it almost feels weird to be like, well, what's their relationship with their girlfriend? Are they nice to them? And it's like, whoa, yeah. I didn't ask to know that necessarily, unless it was. So again, like, if it's good, it can stay quiet, but if it's bad, does it need to be brought to light?
It's a good question. Oh man, I'd have to do some deep thinking on that one. That's a good one.
It's interesting because it's in the same way as like you talk about George Fisher and the donation of the the toys at the end of every tour. If we didn't know about that, would we look at them more stringently? Would we look at them weirder because of their lyrics and their messaging if we didn't know about all the things that they do good outside of their life?
Yeah, kind of that like ambiguity of an artist makes them more mysterious almost.
Yeah, like again, would it be better if we didn't know the good things about them and only the bad, or do we have to know about the bad things, but then is there like a coin toss to that where you have to also know the good things about them?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like a soccer match or something. It's like, oh well, the good's outweighing the bad this time, or the bad's winning this year, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I guess that falls into like definitely their media, like whoever is like running their social medias or how they're like speaking on stage. Because I remember you mentioned with the 1975, they're
Oh yeah.
notorious for antics. Their
Yeah,
vocal
Maddie,
stuff, which is
that's an example we haven't brought up, is the 1975. Maddie Healy specifically has been a very controversial figure. And he doesn't exactly bring a lot of that up. I mean, he does sometimes in his music, and I think he's been very apologetic about what he has said and done in the past. But I feel like because of that, a lot of people are now looking at him with he is very much under a microscope now.
yeah.
And that's another thing, is that if you messed up once, people are going to always look for you and your flaws in the future,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which in some ways is unfair. But if they're also not great, I don't know how to. Again, it's hard. I'm getting confused just talking about it myself, and because it's like, well, is that earned? Is that justified, or is it all based on the severity of that initial controversy?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I heard a really interesting thing about that is we were talking about an artist and a controversy they had, and somebody was like, well, they should take accountability and apologize for it. And then another friend of mine was like, well, if they apologize, they're still going to be canceled. They're never going to be able to have their career back. So what's the point of the apology? And somebody said accountability. And they're like, well, what if they take accountability for it? Then people are going to say, oh, well, they're not taking accountability for it. It's like interesting. Or can you tell someone's taking accountability or not? Or will
Yeah,
you ever really?
it's like if one of your favorite bands like made a post out of the blue and they said something like, you know what, I've done a lot of horrible things and I'm really sorry. And then it's like, what? It's just like, what are you talking about? Because the apology always comes because it's been made public.
Yeah,
And a lot of
yeah.
people have this perspective that they don't apologize because they genuinely feel it. It's to save face.
Yeah, yeah. Like you won't apologize until you're caught. Like that is what it comes down to.
You said don't bring him up, but with Diddy, when he assaulted his girlfriend on that video, he didn't say anything until the video was actually brought up. You know,
Yeah.
he didn't own up to
And
it in the past and no one knew, and then be like, wow. And then that raised the question, would people still be hating on him if he had said that earlier, or is it only because he's trying to look better afterwards?
I feel like the way that it came to light, more people were inclined to like hate him for it and be like, yeah, we're done with him. And it comes down to like doing damage control, as PR people say, because we've seen it before with YouTubers, especially. They'll issue an apology and they'll word it like, and it'll be worded beautifully. They're like, oh man, they're really taking accountability. And then they'll go in and they'll like edit it, or they'll be like, oh well, actually I was apologizing for this and not this. And it's like,
And then it just
oh
gets messy.
yeah, then it gets worse. And something about like almost like apologizing for something that is not out yet can be good if it's good with good intent. It's like with the YouTuber Dr. Disrespect. Do you know that YouTuber?
I don't.
He had some allegations come out, but on a stream he was like, this is it, it won't be much longer, goodbye. And it was like everybody was freaking out and was like, oh my gosh, is he okay? And it raised like all this concern. So then when like stuff came out about him, they were like, oh no, people are making this up because he was like in a bad headspace or something. And it became this like revolving door of just like confusion, and misinformation can become like a huge thing when it comes to separating art from the artist, because
Mm-hmm.
you can see all kinds of stuff all over the internet about artists, and it's up to you to really like dig deep and see if that's true. And not to say that like you have to find a determined answer at any given time. It's just one of those things that, like, it's a very confusing world. Oh my God, it's so confusing.
It's hard now because, I'm maybe it's happened before, but I can't think of a specific example where an individual made an apology before their controversy actually came out, or they owned up to mistakes without any kind of PR crisis happening. I can't think of any off the top of my head because it's always a response, you know?
Yeah.
It's a tough world to navigate, but I think it's also important to face head on, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't want any, for all I know, some of my favorite bands of all time, maybe they have past mistakes. And maybe there's some very dangerous mistakes that they've made, and maybe I just don't know about them yet. But I also don't want to think that every artist I know is a terrible person simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I don't. It's because then what's the point in having favorite? But we'd have no bands to listen to.
No, I was saying that's like such a good point. Like, if you're gonna keep digging and digging and digging, you're gonna eventually find something.
Yeah. And then I go back to my old point where, someone tripped on their shoelace one time and it knocked over a shopping cart with like food in it. And then it's like, how could they?
My God.
Which I think anyone could be like, well, simple accident, But for someone to take advantage of someone, that's a completely different argument.
And I guess the big question, to revolve it back to the beginning, if I do so,
yeah,
can you separate the art from the artist?
That's a thinker.
Spending over an hour talking about it, and it's like,
Yeah, I know, right? You thought that at a certain point it would just like concrete and you could be like, yes, I know my answer. But, this is a interesting conversation that has been stemming for a long time. I've been a part of conversations that involve it. And I don't know, man, it's such a gray area. It really is. And I really think that the best way I can surmise it is that you have to make that decision for yourself. It's a yes with an asterisk because you can look at people and be like, you know what? This is something that I find irresponsible and heinous. I cannot support this person and their music anymore. I think people are very quick in this world, and I've always said this and thought this, is that the world is always very gray, but people want to make it black and white, which is not the deepest analogy ever. I'm not waxing poetic here. But what I mean is, when it comes down to the big central question of separating art from the artist, again, you can do it, but it's on your terms and how you choose to listen to your music. Because we said a while ago, there's no wrong way to listen to music. And I'll never condemn someone for listening to a certain artist for X reasons. But at the same point, I may be more inquired to ask why they choose to, because I don't support it. Like, if someone was like, yeah, I still listen to Kanye, and I would have to ask them, like, why?
What are the reasons?
Yeah, or even falling in reverse, I'd be like, why do you like him? And so what do you think about? And then I kind of broach it forward, like, so what do you think about what they've said? Their actions. And then if they're like, what are you talking about? Or if they're like, that doesn't bother me, then that really can inform me about who they are.
Yeah, you can learn a lot about a person.
Yeah. So I guess bouncing the question back to you, what is your take on being able to separate an art and artist?
For me, it coming from somebody who grew up all in the arts, like in the theater, in the movies, in the music, I quickly at a young age learned how to separate those things. I was like, oh, like, I don't care about their personal life. That's their personal life. As like Woody Allen, I would say, is a really good example of that. Woody Allen did some predatory things, and one of my all-time favorite movies is A Midnight in Paris. I absolutely adore that movie. And we had this discussion in college about separating art from the artist. And it's like, can you enjoy this movie for the movie's sake? And yes, I love the movie. And it's the same with music. It's the same with regular art, paintings, anything. And at a young age, I would say that I separated all the way up until I was about 22, when I realized that, like, I saw the harm that person did to other people. And I was like, oh God, I was like, that makes me like sick to my stomach feeling. And I'm like, because when you support somebody like by buying like their movies, their merch, their CDs, anything, you're like helping that person reach a broader spectrum of people.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of like responsible because like there's one band that I like absolutely loved called The Mentors, and had found out that a few of the guys in that band had like done some horrific things, and I had bought in CDs and a shirt, and I was like, man, like what if me not buying those things like wouldn't have given them enough money to get bigger venues and then hurt those people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like weird because I still like their music. I just don't want to support them. And I find that I do pick and choose what bothers me more. Like Danny Carey from Tool punched somebody in an airport. I still love Tool. What the Mentors did, I don't like that. I don't listen to them anymore. But I would say that I separate art from the artist more than I probably should. And it's something that I'm like kind of getting better about looking into, because I feel like the older I get, the more I grow, the more I care about like other people. So that's my take on all of it, and that's where I'm at the present
I think
time. And my opinion might change of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much what we think right now, and maybe society changes over time in the next few years or by next week at this rate. You know, this may all be outdated, but this is just our perspectives at this particular era, just what we kind of think on it. Because, and again, I will say we are both musicians. We're both massive nerds of the culture of art, and we're goobers for entertainment and media in so many regards. And at a certain point, I have to say art, again, is still just an entertainment. Sure, it can help me, it can move me, it can inspire me and uplift me and make me feel joyful in so many regards. It can make me feel, actually, not even just that, just so many emotions that I also at some points have to take a step back and be like, in the world, in the real world, like, what is it doing to people? You know? And you can agree and disagree with the politics that surround media. Some people are completely agnostic to it and think it doesn't matter. It's just about the music. And some people will only look at the people that nitpick to death and think that they are in the wrong for trying to filter what is good and isn't good, when really they're both doing things right and both doing things wrong. It's a real back and forth dichotomy. And again, they will say that no, what I'm doing is right, because no one wants to necessarily be wrong. But I think people are afraid to be wrong in the fear that they get fact checked, they'll retaliate in some kind of way and be like, well, screw you. No, I'm still going to listen to this. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't want to, I guess, admit that it was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about it like that. I'm sorry. You know? Hopefully that was enriching for the viewers too. I don't know if they've gained anything from it, or if they feel any differently about what we said, or maybe we just gave them 10 recommendations for artists to go listen to. But
it's a heavy episode, but an important episode.
It was a good conversation. I was posed some very interesting questions and ideas from my co-host, if you will. I appreciate the very enriching conversation. And hell, maybe we'll if there's a news story that breaks, there'll be a part 2 to all this, and we'll actually base what we talked about off of that. So who knows? But it was a very forward and engaging conversation. Hopefully people enjoyed that, or if they clicked off, hey, you can come back now, like they know when we're supposed to be talking again.
Yeah.
We're gonna move from that heavy conversation. We're gonna get right into the weekly music suggestion. So this is the segment where me and Trent will both recommend each other an album, a band, or a song, whatever it may be, and then we have to, in the next episode, discuss it and pitch each other on what we thought of our particular recommendations. This is not us trying to pick anything for each other that we think they would like, just something that we like, and we want to share it and pass it along. So I'll take lead on this one for my music suggestion. That's a hard word for me to say sometimes. Suggestion. I'm going to recommend you some music now. I'm recommending the 2022 album, Rouge Carpet Disaster. It's by a band called Static Dress. They're from the UK. They're a post-hardcore slash hardcore band. The melodies and the guitar leads, and like I think you'll love the drumming on it. These are probably one of my favorite bands to come out of the metalcore hardcore scene in the last few years. I think they've got great choruses, great songwriting, amazing musicians all around, and fairly unique production too. It's not typical chug chug stuff. There's a lot of interesting effects they do, instrumentation and production. And again, I think that what it really comes down to is just good songs and good songwriting. So their 2022 album, and I wanted to say Rogue, but it's Rouge, like the color.
Yeah.
Rouge Carpet Disaster was my favorite album of 2022. I think it packs a hell of a punch. It's fast, it's fiery, but it also knows when to chill out. It gets shoegazy, it gets metal, it gets screamo in a lot of moments. It reminds me of early Underoath in a lot of ways, but with a little bit more polish. They are just coming through with a sound that's very nostalgic, but it also feels fresh. They're not just aping a style for the sake of doing it, and it actually stands out from the pack of what a lot of their contemporaries are doing, and they become, again, one of my favorite bands of the last few years. So I'm picking my 2022 album of the year, Rouge Carpet Disaster, Static Dress. Check it out. And also, they're entirely, or at least at the time that the album came out, they were all self-produced, no label. They pressed their album with, like how we do through like a disc maker of some kind. And all their music videos were self-made too. They have this intricate, I'm not as much into it, but they do have a story that goes with the album. It's a very interesting band. They're very ambitious. They don't just settle. And again, being self-funded, I think, is a very inspired. Now they're signed to Roadrunner, actually, which is good for them. It's a good underdog story, and I appreciate how good they are at what they do. So I hope they get all the love in the world moving forward. Yeah. Static Dress.
Heck yeah, I was about to say, you pitched that like a record store exec, bro. You were all in.
Dude, I sometimes don't know like how to tell people to like listen to stuff. I'll be like, oh, if you like this, then you'll like this. But I'm trying to get better at pitching what an album is and actually summarizing it in an effective but compelling way. I'm trying my hardest. But again, fully prepared for any of my picks to always come back and you'd be like, the fuck was that?
Booty.
That was dookie, bro.
Booty,
nah, but what you got cooking?
No, you ready for this? I'm gonna recommend you AVOW by the Australian just house wrecking band Portal. Portal is one of the most interesting and just out of left field bands I've ever listened to. I can't compare them to anything but lucid dreaming. That is the only way I can describe this band. They have elements of black metal, they have elements of atmospheric prog, and then they have like harsh noise elements. They are industrial in tone, but then sometimes you're like, I have no idea what this is. Nobody knows their identities. They are all in costumes, most of the time in Pope uniforms with like sheets over their faces. But every album is a concept album. But AVOW is their 2021 release, and it is the last thing they have done. They have been working for the past years on a new record, but this album is just absolute fear-inducing music. I mean, it is borderlining like being in a dream and being surrounded by snakes in the Serengeti. I mean, it is absolute bonkers. If you are fans of stuff like Taylor Swift, Chappell Roan, you will not like this. But no, they are really good. When you listen to this band, then look up what they look like, and you are gonna absolutely love them. You can look them up now if you'd like, Lars, just so you can get a good reaction.
I'm curious.
Yeah, they hail out of Australia, as most of the most brutal music in the world.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Fuel.
Is this Pumpkinhead?
Yeah, very good comparison. The fingers are scary, but
dude, those hands, what the hell?
Yeah, Portal is an incredible band. They need more love and respect because I want to see them get big enough to have a tour in the U.S. I don't think that'll ever happen, but
Interesting.
it's got to happen. But yeah,
this does look scary.
Yeah, it is not for the faint of heart. I'm a huge fan of all their records. I've been trying to get the CDs and vinyl for a hot minute.
Is it just bad shipping? It takes a minute.
Yeah, but I also want to get like first pressings of all their records, which are
Fair enough.
Impossible. But
Whoa, these
OW, their 2021 release, highly recommended if you're wanting something that is absolute nightmare fuel. Great freaking.
Yeah, the track listing, like there's like some 10-minute long songs on here.
Yeah, you're in for a long haul, brother.
Okay, I'm interested. I'm in for it.
Heck yeah, and next time I want to hear your thoughts on it, because most of the time, 95% of people come back saying they don't like this band.
Nice. That makes me more excited. It's weird. Sometimes, like, I'm more excited when there's division amongst people because I want to see what people are talking about. You know, like, what is it about this band that can set people off or make them love it? You know, if everyone loved it, it's more like, all right.
Yeah, it is crazy ride. I mean, strap in, bro. It is crazy.
I will have a cup of milk and some gummy bears, and I will sit upright in my bed. And I will put my headphones in and just be like, okay, here we go.
The best way to experience this record, which has been recommended to me by a buddy of mine who worked at a mental institution, but he's a big
he worked it, yeah.
Yeah, he's a big fan of this band. He put me on, but he said what you do is you get in a room and you cut off every single light and have it pitch black, and you cut it on in your headphones, and you lay completely flat, like on the bed, just completely butt naked. He was like, this is rawest form to listen to this album.
Am I listening to an album or taking part of an experiment?
I mean, any listener, go listen to this record and do the same and comment exactly your thoughts afterwards.
Hey, I'm home. Oh my God, what are you doing? I'm listening to Portal.
The comments are like, so I have a demon in my house.
It's just like, nurse, Portal got out again.
The Baphomet keeps knocking in my window.
For real, dude.
But that's my recommendation. 2001 record by Portal, AVOW.
Hell yeah. I can't wait. I'm actually more excited because I'm prepared for a head trip.
Oh yeah.
And if that means I got to listen to it a few times, then I'm game. Let's go.
Good luck getting through it a few times.
Dude, you'll want to die by the end of it.
Dude, after like the fourth listen, I was like, I think I'm gonna jump out a window.
I'm hearing something. What's in the back of my head? Well, anyway, that's my recommendation. That's your recommendation. Thank you for the rec. Hopefully you enjoy mine, as I hope I enjoy yours. And we'll get back next week for the reviews on what we think about these respective records. And in that case, we come now to the final segment, the Hot Take Handshake, where once a week, one of us will come through with a musical hot take. And we have to see if we agree and debate it right here on the show. So, Trenton, you're up. Do you have a hot take?
I do. You ready?
All right. Here we go, boy.
The Strokes are not a good band.
I'm sorry, I disagree.
I don't get it. No song goes anywhere. Their song Reptile or whatever the hell it's called is just like pointless. They're considered like gods of indie alternative and like pop rock, but I don't think that there is any substance in anything they have done. I don't think their writing's good. I think the mixes are just mediocre. And like the fact that people are like, oh man, they just inspire me so much. I'm like, you must not have a lot of inspiration. You need to get out of under the rock and stop watching SpongeBob. Like, bro, like,
dude, you're for some people's throats right now. I see.
If you like the Strokes, bro, like, I mean, what you do is you get in your car, you go down to Opelika, you go into 10,000 Hertz Records, shout out 10,000 Hertz. You walk in there and you ask whoever's working at the desk to put you on some good music.
Wow, I didn't know you had so much hatred in your blood. Like, I knew you didn't like them, but like, this is some bile you're spitting today.
Because every time somebody recommends them to me, they're like, "You just haven't heard the right Strokes song." I'm like, "And you haven't heard the right band yet." Like, I'm very confused.
Such the Strokes hater you are. It's so good.
Freaking Ratatouille, bro. That song is crazy.
Wait, Ratatouille?
That's Ratatouille. My bad. That's on me. That's on me.
Yeah, you know that song, Ratatouille.
Oh man. God.
That was fucking good. That was funny. Oh my god. The reason I disagree, it's interesting. You know, I've thought about it before because what I love about the band, I love the dueling guitars. I think they both bounce off of each other so well. The instrumentation has always been playful. The drums may not be the most intricate in the world, but they're actually, you know what? No, I think there are some intricate drum parts too. There's simple grooves, but there's also a lot of interesting wrist work at play. I know that the big joke is just Julian is just crooning the entire band. You know, he's just
he's gooning.
It's not crooning, not.
Oh, I was like, yeah, he is gooning.
He's like, you're gooning, bro. No, he's basically just on the mic, just. You could say he's slurring his words basically the entire time. It's
the mumble rap of alternative music. Mumble track.
Mumble track. No. But I think they've had some truly great albums. Like, the albums that are good are so good to me. But they've also had some albums that I think just kind of pointless and derivative. So I do agree that they have their moments, but they've also had a very unsteady career. I wouldn't put them over like in Arctic Monkeys as far as consistency, if we're thinking bands in the same field. What you giggling for?
Yeah, I'm just laughing about Arctic Monkeys, but that's a story for another time.
Oh no! Oh yeah. We gotta tell that story at some point. That's so funny.
That'll be like for like meeting famous people.
Unless you just want to tell it right now, because I think it'll.
I want to tell that when I have a lot of time to detail that story out, because that is that chunk of my life right there that I'll never get back.
It's so. It's so good.
200 times.
Yeah, man. Well, anyway, Strokes. Yeah, the music that I love, but like the highs are very high, but the lows are can be very middle of the road. That being said, I think you could argue that they haven't earned their place necessarily because of their sometimes less than stellar output that they've had, but it's tough sometimes. Like, what I love, and then like what I don't like, I just think is very boring, and therefore it's tough for me to like put them in my top 30 bands, you know, even though like a few of their albums are in like my like favorite albums of all time list, you know. It's like, I love Is This It, Room on Fire, The New Abnormal, great records, and I really like Angles, but First Impressions of Earth and Come Down Machine, ooh, very rough sometimes. But I respect your opinion in a lot of ways.
I respect your.
In a lot of ways, I think you sometimes have the right idea.
I'm just a harsh person. Some people are like, oh, I just don't like it. I'm like, this shit whack. This is horrible.
Yeah, I mean, hey man, it's all opinions at the end of the day. And
exactly.
That's what this show's about, sharing opinions and why they're bad.
Oh God,
I think that will conclude another episode of Mad Sounds. This was a good discussion, and I think
this is a really good one.
Yeah, it was topical. It was conversational too. I hope we hit some good points, and maybe because it's so big, maybe we'll hit it in a two-parter way down the line. We'll see what happens, but hopefully anyone listening enjoyed the conversation and enjoyed listening to another installment of Mad Sounds. I am Lars Smallwood.
I am Golden of the Trenton.
Oh.
But thank you for listening.
Yeah, that's a good way to end it right there. Laters.
Boy. Goobers.